problem out loud exactly how I would do it on the test. So here are my thought process. The problem tells me that the average is 20, and that average is the average of 5 starters. Okay, so I know to figure out the average I have to do sum divided by the number of things they are. So over here I know the average is 20 and there's 5 number of players, so I should be able to figure out the sum. And here's something that I do know: the SAT loves testing average problems, and really the key component there is to figure out the sum of the list that they give me. So since my average here is 20 and there's 5 starters, my sum must be 100, and I can really memorize this formula. To figure out the sum of a list of numbers, you can just take the average and multiply by the number of things they are. So if I have these 5 players, I know that their sum of their scores is going to be 100. And again, I know it's 100 because the average is 20. I multiply by the number of things they are. That'll give me the total of the sum. I remember learning this phrase: average times number equals t. So it's called ANT, A-N-T. Average times the number equals the total. So I know that this plus that plus that plus that must equal 100. Now the question is, what is the greatest possible number of players who could have scored 14 points? So the answers are A01, B1, C2, and D3. And I'm going to use these answer choices to my advantage. I'm trying to figure out which is the greatest possible number of players. So the greatest possible number is 3. So let's see if 3 does work out. Let's say if 3 of these players scored 14 points. Then 14 times 3 is 42. So I know that this adds up to 42. That means that these two must add up to 58, right? Because 58 plus 42 would give me 100. Now remember, the problem is saying that the player scored anywhere from 0 to 25 points. So if it's 0 to 25 points and these are 58, then this would have to be 29 and 29 if you break it evenly, right? If this is the highest number possible is 25, so let's say that this guy does score 25, which is the highest points. And they're saying actually between 0 and 25, so this really would have to be 24. So if this is 24, there's no way that this number can be less than 24 and still give me 58. So I know that D wouldn't work. Now let's try C, 2. So let's say if there's 2 players that scored 14. So that means that these 2 players scored 28, right? 14 and 14 there. I'm trying to get rid of this simultaneously, okay? So that means that these 2 players right there have 28 points. And let's see what's left over now. So 100 minus 28. So that means that these 3 players must have scored 72. Now let's say the highest here is 24, 24, and 24. Does that add up to 72? It does, because I know that 24 times 3 is 72. So my answer is going to be C2. Because if there's 2 players that score 14 each, this still works out. But if I made it 3 like I was showing you before, if I had 3 players that were scoring 14, then this wouldn't work out because the players have to score anywhere from 0 to 25. So really the greatest possible players that could score 14 has to be 2. So a couple of key things to take away from this is if you're given the average, a lot of the times figuring out the sum of those list of numbers is usually key. And how you do that is by taking the average, which was 20 in this case, multiplying by the number of things there, this was 5 players, and that would give you the total, which in this case is 100. And so I knew that all these 5 things must add up to 100. Then I just worked through the answer choices. I started at 3 because the question is saying what is the greatest possible number. So if 3 worked out, I would know that 3 is the answer. But since it didn't, then I moved to the second biggest number, which was 2. So these 2 players, I put them down as 14. And then I knew that these 3 players would have to add up to 72. And that works out because if I give all the 3 players, so let's say these 3 players score 24 points, 24 points, and 24 points, everything here adds up to 100. I fall within the parameters that the problem gives me, and everything works out.